now are in what's known as a lockdown, which is just about the most predictable state of affairs that I can possibly imagine. Because there is a global script playing out, which is being directed by this global cult that I have so long exposed, which has no borders. And the idea is to lock down the world, or at least the vast majority of it, particularly in those countries that have an influence on where the world goes. So we're now up to a point where apparently 3 billion people means we're very fast closing in on half the world population are in a lockdown situation of some kind. Um, the the script, for anyone who knows what the game is absolutely laughable. We've gone from small measures to deeply draconian fascistic measures in literally days. So last weekend, people could still go out and experience the sunshine as it was. But then, of course, the media, which is owned by the cult, even though most of the journalists involved are just, pathetic pawns in a game they don't even begin to understand. Write an article on this, take this angle. Yes, sir, I will. So they were blasting these people that went out and enjoyed the weekend. And it was so blatantly obvious that this was psychological preparation for what was planned from the start by the dark suits in the shadows. And that's what we have now, where you are allowed out in a allegedly free country um, to have one period of exercise per day and to go to the shops to get food as few trips as you can, they say. And then you've got to stay the rest of the time in home. You cannot go visit people. People can't visit you, and you can't be outside in a group of more than two people unless they are the people you live with. Um, Absolutely fascistic democracy, suspending, and to a large extent deleting, because they won't roll back all of them. Uh, Laws have been passed to give the British government the power to do what it likes, to police the streets with the military, whatever, can do it all. And like I say, this was always going to be planned. So then Johnson, who I do think to an extent has been bounced into this out of fear of being blamed for all these people are going to die, and it'll be your fault, says the media, says brains of Britain like Piers Morgan, says the people advising him. And they're advising him on the basis of, wait for this, computer models. These are the same computer models in the basic technique that have constantly given us nightmare scenarios relating to climate change, which have not happened. All on climate models. And climate models are a wonderful scam, because what it means is if you put the data in in a certain way, you know you're going to get certain data out at the other end, and that's the data you want to push your agenda. So I think it's called the Imperial College. I think in London, that's what's driving the government policy. Anyone ask any questions? Who are these people? Who are they connected to? The medical profession is massively um, connected to the Freemasons, for instance, and other secret societies. So who are these people that are driving this policy? Who are the people that are driving the policy in other countries, which is exactly the same? So we now have a situation where I went to the store yesterday, and the previous time I went, which was 2 days before, everything was kind of normal. I mean, there was a lot less on the shelves. Yeah, okay, but it was just the same. You walked in, and you went, got what you wanted, left. And then I went yesterday, and I turn up, and I'm going to go through the door that I always go through, and it's locked. So I'm thinking, oh, what's going on here? So I saw that the other door on the other side of the entrance was open. People were going in. Not many people. I thought, crikey, this is amazing. It's so quiet. And the number of cars in the car park kind of supported that. So it was going to be, at least it's going to be a quiet little shop, and only for me. I don't want much. So then I go, and there's a big gap in front of the entrance, and so I walk in because it seems to me that everything's kind of open. The door's open. I saw a guy on the door who's not usually there, but everyone, it just seemed the space was there, and I walked in. I didn't know the system had changed. I had no idea. So the guy says to me, "You've got to go back to the back of the queue." Now I can't see a freaking queue, and I realise why, because it goes back so far, and every one is 6 foot 2 meters away from everybody. Therefore, the queue is not obvious because people aren't close to each other. So anyway, I look, and I see this queue of people 6 feet apart going back as far as the eye could see and beyond. And this is in the middle of the day when the car park's quiet. What the heck it is like in busy times, I don't know. And the other thing, well, there are many other things that come from this. One, it was a sunny day. But of course, it ain't always going to be a sunny day. It's going to be peeing down some days. It's going to be blowing a cold gale. So what happens to those people, including old people, who are standing in the cold and the rain to get into the supermarket? What does anyone think that's going to do for their health? Because, of course, it's not about their health. It's about control. So, anyway, I look at this fricking queue, and I basically said, in words of one syllable, well, you can stick that. I'm out of here. The world is mad. And I left. And I ain't going back while this system operates. If I have to go hungry, I'll go fricking hungry. And my question is this: why suddenly is it necessary to queue outside a supermarket 6 feet apart when 2 days ago it wasn't? Because what's happening is this script is being pushed, one thing after another, rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. Oh, right, they've accepted that, we'll give them some more. So we have a situation which I've described in the past in this way. This is the way the cult works. They push the first gate, i.e., trying to make something happen. And if there's no resistance, they walk through and they go to the next gate and they push that. And if there's no resistance, they walk through that and they go to the next gate and there's no resistance. And so it goes on. And of course, there is no resistance to what is going on now. You're demonized if you challenge it. Well, I don't care. I'm interested in the truth, not a round of bloody applause. So I left and looked across and saw this line of people 6 foot apart because they're told to be 6 foot apart. And the overwhelming majority would not be questioning that. What I want to do in this video cast, especially in the early part of it, podcast, whatever you want to call it, is to put what is happening in context of just how supposedly lethal this virus is. Because I'll tell you now, I don't believe it is. And you'll see why I say that as I go through this podcast. So I'm going to start with a story. It's on a website called Off Guardian. And the headline is 12 experts questioning coronavirus panic. Below it says, is a list of 12 medical experts whose opinions on the coronavirus outbreak contradict the official narratives of the mainstream media. Mainstream media. They're only media in the sense that they communicate information. They're not mainstream media that they communicate accurate information. They just repeat what the system tells them, and it's called news. Neither are they journalists. Press enter people who don't question, just do what they're told, believe what they're told, not only should not be journalists, they cannot be journalists, because the very basis of proper real journalism is not to be a press enter person, but to question everything and see if it stands up. So I'm going to go through a few of these. First of all, excuse me on the pronunciation, it's not correct, but what they say and what their experience is most important. Dr. Sharaf Bakti is a specialist in microbiology. He was a professor at the Johann Gutenberg University in Mainz and head of the Institute of Medical Microbiology and Hygiene, and one of the cited research scientists in German history. He said, "We are afraid that 1 million infections with the new virus will lead to 30 deaths per day over the next 100 days. But we do not realize that 20, 30, 40, or 100 patients positive for normal coronaviruses that are around all the time, not this Covid-19, are already dying every day." So my question is, how many are going in the statistics of Covid-19 deaths that are actually dying of something else? The government's anti-Covid-19 measures, he said, are grotesque, absurd, and very dangerous. The life expectancy of millions is being shortened. The horrifying impact on the world economy threatens the existence of countless people. The consequences on medical care are profound. Already, services to patients in need are reduced, operations cancelled, practices empty, hospital personnel dwindling. All this will impact profoundly, he says, on our society. All these measures are leading to self-destruction and collective suicide based on nothing but a spook. And he might have added, and I will, that that's exactly why this is going on, to lead to self-destruction and collective economic suicide. And I ask this question: how many people are dying of other problems because their treatment has been stopped? Operations have been stopped because everything is focused on this virus. How many people are going to die as a result of the economic deprivation, desperation that is going to follow this? And I'll give you the answer: a hell of a lot more that are going to die from this virus. So this is what happens when you give your power away and you give your mind away, which vast chunks of the human race have spent their entire lives being programmed to do. So we move on. Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, a German physician specializing in pulmonology, that's the lungs, a politician, former chairman of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. In 2009, he called for an inquiry into alleged conflicts of interest surrounding the EU response to the swine flu pandemic. And this is what he says about the coronavirus. Politicians are being courted by scientists who want to be important to get money for their institutions, scientists who just swim along in the mainstream, brackets, see climate change, and want their part of it. And what is missing right now is a rational way of looking at things. We should be asking questions like, how did you find out this virus was dangerous? How was it before? Didn't we have the same thing last year? Is it even new? That's missing, he said. Why is it missing? Because we are being scammed. To be terrified of something that should not attract our terror. And I'll come to the numbers as we go along to support that. Dr. Joel Kettner, Professor of Community Health Services and Surgery in Manitoba University, former Chief Public Health Officer for Manitoba Province, and Medical Director of the International Centre for Infectious Diseases. He says, I have never seen anything like this, anywhere near like this. I'm not talking about the pandemic, because I've seen 30 of them, one every year. It's called influenza, he said. And other respiratory, that's the one. And other respiratory illness viruses. We don't always know what they are, but I've never seen this reaction, and I'm trying to understand why. Well, I can help you there, Dr. Kettner. It's to justify global fascistic Orwellian control and to destroy the world economic system so the cult can replace it with one that they totally control through AI. He goes on, I worry about the message to the public, about the fear of coming into contact with people, being in the same space as people, shaking their hands, having meetings with people. I worry about many, many consequences related to that. Now, what have I been writing in my books all these years? That the idea, especially in more recent years, the cult wants to drive humans apart. It wants to replace human interaction with human AI machine interaction. Just look at what's happening now. Apart from the people actually in your home, people are not interacting, communicating directly, eye to eye, face to face with people. Instead, they're doing it all through technology. And more with these office assistants and all this crap, people are interacting with AI as if it's human. All part of the psychology. He goes on in the province in China where this is supposed to have started. He said in the province where there has been the most cases and deaths so far, the actual number of cases reported is 1 per 1,000 people, and the actual rate of deaths reported is 1 per 20,000 people. So maybe that would help put things into perspective. Another medical expert with a mind of his own, Dr. John Ioannidis, professor of medicine and health research and policy and of biomedical data research at Stanford University School of Medicine, and professor of statistics at Stanford University School of Humanities and Sciences. He is director of the Stanford Prevention Research Center and co-director of the Meta Research Innovation Center at Stanford. He's also editor-in-chief of the European Journal of Clinical Investigation. He was chairman of the Department of Hygiene and Epidemiology, University of Medical School, as well as adjunct professor at Tufts University School of Medicine. As a physician, scientist, and author, he has made contributions to evidence-based medicine, epidemiology, science, data, and clinical research. And in addition, he pioneered the field of meta research. He has shown that much of the published research does not meet good scientific standards of evidence. And this is what he says. Patients who have been tested for SARS-CoV-2 are disproportionately those with severe symptoms and bad outcomes. As most health systems have limited testing capacity, selection bias may even worsen in the near future. One situation where an entire closed population was tested was the Diamond Princess cruise ship and its quarantined passengers. The case fatality rate there was 1%, but this was a largely elderly population in which the death rate from COVID-19 is much higher. Could the COVID-19 case fatality rate, he said, be that low? No, some say, pointing to the high rate in elderly people. However, even some so-called mild or common cold type coronaviruses that have been known for decades can have case fatality rates as high as 8% when they infect elderly people in nursing homes. If we had not known about a new virus out there and had not checked individuals with PCR tests, I'll come to those as I go along, the number of total deaths due to, quote, influenza-like illness would not seem unusual this year. At most, we might have casually noted that this flu season seems to be a bit worse than average. We move on. Dr. Yoram Lass, an Israeli physician, politician, and former director or general of the health ministry. He also worked as associate dean of the Tel Aviv University Medical School, and during the 1980s presented the science-based television show Taspit. This is what he says. Italy, of course, where Italy is being known, is being used as the the example to scare the rest of the world. And so we need to look at this. I'm going to look at Italy in a number of ways in this podcast. But this is what the opinion of Dr. Yaram Lass is. Italy is known for its enormous morbidity in respiratory problems, more than 3 times any other country. In the US, about 40,000 people die in a regular flu season. And so far, at the time he was speaking, 40 to 50 people have died from the coronavirus, most of them in a nursing home in Kirkland, Washington. In every country, more people die from regular flu compared with those who die from coronavirus. There is a very good example that we all forget, the swine flu in 2009. That was a virus that reached the world from Mexico. And until today, there is no vaccination against it. But what? At that time, there was no Facebook, or maybe there was, but it was still in its infancy. The coronavirus, in contrast, is a virus with public relations. Whoever thinks that governments end viruses is wrong, he said. So, Dr. Pietro Vernazzi, a Swiss physician specializing in infectious diseases at the Cantonal Hospital St. Gallen and professor of health policy. He says, we have reliable figures from Italy and a work by epidemiologists, which has been published in the renowned science journal Science, which examines the spread in China. This makes it clear that around 85% of all infections have occurred without anyone noticing the infection. 90% of the deceased patients are verifiably over 70 years old, 50% over 80 years. Now, I'm going to come to another example of this from an Oxford University study that was published this week. We are starting to realize how many people have had this virus, often with no symptoms or very mild symptoms, and they've just got on with their lives. And the very fact that the number of people who've had it and recovered in those circumstances is extraordinarily vast compared with what they're telling us. Now, this has fundamental implications for what we're being told to believe in terms of the lethal nature of this virus. It means the more we understand, the more people who've had it and recovered, often without even knowing they've had it, the smaller the percentage of the death rate becomes. Dr. Vernazza goes on. In Italy, 1 in 10 people diagnosed die, according to the findings of the science publication. That is statistically 1 of every 1,000 people infected. Each individual case is tragic, but often, similar to the flu season, it affects people who are at the end of their lives. If we close the schools, we will prevent the children from quickly becoming immune. He said we should better integrate the scientific facts into political decisions. That'll be the bloody day. Frank Ulrich Montgomery, German radiologist, former president of the German Medical Association and deputy chairman of the World Medical Association. He says, I'm not a fan of lockdown. Anyone who imposes something like that must also say when and how to pick it up again. Since we have to assume that the virus will be with us for a long time, I wonder when we will return to normal. By the way, just like the flu viruses and other coronaviruses have been with us for a long time, without the need to shut down the world economy. I wonder, he says, when we will return to normal. You can't keep schools and daycare centres closed until the end of the year. Italy has imposed a lockdown and has the opposite effect. They quickly reached their capacity limits but did not slow down the virus spread within the lockdown. Professor Henrik Streeck, German HIV researcher, epidemiologist and clinical trialist. He's professor of virology and the director of the Institute of Virology and HIV Research at Bonn University. He says, the new pathogen is not that dangerous. It is even less dangerous than SARS-1. The special thing is that SARS-CoV-2 replicates in the upper throat area and is therefore much more infectious because the virus jumps from throat to throat, so to speak. But that is also an advantage. Because SARS-1 replicates in the deep lungs, it is not so infectious, but it definitely gets on the lungs, which makes it more dangerous. You have to take into account that the SARS-CoV-2 deaths in Germany were exclusively old people. In Heinsberg, for example, a 78-year-old man with previous illnesses died of heart failure, and that without SARS-2 lung involvement. Since he was infected, he was naturally put to appear on the Covid19 statistics. But the question is whether he would not have died anyway, even without SARS-2. Dr. Yanis Ruzel, team of researchers from the Institute Hospital University, I'm trying to translate here, of Mediterranean Infection, Marseille, and the Institute, it's a long title in French, dealing with a public hospital in Marseille, conducting a peer-reviewed study on coronavirus mortality for the government of France under the, quote, Investments for Future program. This is what this team of researchers say about this virus. The problem of SARS-CoV-2 is probably overestimated, as 2.6 million people die of respiratory infections each year, compared with less than 4,000 deaths for SARS-CoV-2 at the time of writing. This study compared the mortality rate of SARS-CoV-2 in OECD countries, and that was 1.3%, with the mortality rate of common coronaviruses identified in patients, 0.8% from 1st of January 2013 to 2nd of March 2020. When this was tested, they say it should be noted that systematic studies of other coronaviruses, but not yet for SARS-CoV-2, have found that the percentage of asymptomatic carriers is equal or even higher than the percentage of symptomatic patients. The same data for SARS-CoV-2 may soon be available, which will further reduce the relative risk associated with this specific pathology. So we're going down the same road again here, and we're going to go down it a few times as I go along with different stories, that large numbers of people that are not on these statistics at all have had this virus without symptoms. I haven't even known they've had it. And every single one that has is pushing the death rate ratio for this virus down and down and down and down. Dr. David Katz, an American physician and founding director of the Yale University Prevention Research Center, says, I am deeply concerned that the social, economic, and public health consequences of this near total meltdown of normal life, schools, businesses closed, gatherings banned, will be long lasting and calamitous, possibly, definitely, graver than the direct toll of the virus itself. The stock market will bounce back in time, but many businesses never will. The unemployment, impoverishment, and despair likely to result will be public health scourges of the first order. Michael T. Osterholm, Regents Professor and Director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. This is what he says. Consider the effect of shutting down offices, schools, transportation systems, restaurants, hotels, stores, theatres, concert halls, sporting events, and other venues indefinitely, and leaving all of their workers unemployed and on the public dole. The likely result will not just be a depression, but a complete economic breakdown, with countless permanently lost jobs long before a vaccine or natural immunity takes hold. And of course, natural immunity is not going to take hold if you're keeping people apart. I've said many times, if you feel it's necessary to cocoon old people and those with other stresses on their immune system, fine. But to shut down the entire global economic system on the basis of a virus which 80% of people recover from with very mild symptoms, the vast overwhelming majority of the rest with moderate symptoms, and only a tiny few are in any danger from this virus, is insane. And yet again, there is method in the madness, because it's not about health. It's about transforming human society. In the way that I have described, this cult wants to do it for 30 years. He goes on. The best alternative will probably entail letting those at low risk for serious disease continue to work. It's what I've been saying from the start. Keep business and manufacturing operating and run society while at the same time advising higher risk individuals to protect themselves through physical distancing or ramping up our healthcare capacity as aggressively as possible. With this battle plan, we could gradually build up immunity without destroying the financial structure on which our lives are based. Dr. Peter Grochte is a professor of clinical research, design, and analysis at the University of Copenhagen and founder of the Cochrane Medical Collaboration. He's written several books on corruption in the field of medicine. My God, that's not going on, is it now? And the power of big pharmaceutical companies. He says, our main problem is that no one will ever get in trouble for measures that are too draconian. This is the psychology, you see, that's being played out on people like Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister. They will only get in trouble if they do too little. So our politicians and those working with public health do much more than they should. No such draconian measures were applied during the 2009 influenza pandemic, and they obviously cannot be applied every winter, which is all year round, and as it all is always winter somewhere. We cannot close down the whole world permanently. Should it turn out that the epidemic wanes before long, there will be a queue of people wanting to take credit for this, and we can be damn sure draconian measures will be applied again next time, and more immediately. This is the precedent that's being set. But remember the joke about tigers. Why do you blow your horn? To keep the tigers away. But there are no tigers. There, you see. So there are opinions relating to this hysteria, this scam, from experts in their field who have a mind of their own.